Good evening, everyone. We'll bring this Board of Finance meeting for March 17th, 2025 to order at 7 o'clock. I'm Mike Anderson, the chair, with Dan Smith, vice chair, Carl Johnston, Gary Nino, Sarah Nelson, Amy Friend is the secretary and alternate, Lou Gingerella, and is Winona on? Winona's not here yet. And Suzanne Thoreau from the central office. And the next agenda item is public comment. Anyone have a public comment to start? I will say I'm sorry. It is St. Patrick's Day and you guys are all in a meeting. And I realized on my way home from work that could have ruined some people's plans. Tried to bring it up with my wife. She's like, yeah. And I'm like, she's actually Irish. I'm Scandinavian. Yes, you may come up if you. You will. Yep. Yeah, we have, after we go through everything and review minutes, there'll be another chance for public comment. Anyone online? Okay. All right, so let's just, 3 and 4 and 5 are all kind of integrated. We're just basically doing budget review. We have draft 4 from the Board of Selectmen for government operating debt and capital. We have the Board of Education's budget presented last week. And I sent out an Excel spreadsheet earlier, which came from Christine Diaz from several years ago. She had it on her laptop and we were able to plug in different mill rate scenarios to see where it takes us for a bottom line. I don't know if, Suzanne, were you able to pull that up on yours? Okay, so you can't do it on the one that's on the screen? Okay. All right, so the total net assessment for the grand list looks like as of 3/6/2025 is 640,259,118. And the one that I sent out earlier, I didn't have that number, so I was kind of backtracking from draft 4 of the Board of Selectmen budget. I really wish we could put this up for everybody. Can you email that to your own laptop, Suzanne? Okay. I think it's just, this is a useful tool. Number one, because it tells you where you are with the revenue coming in and the budgets that are as presented under the present mill rate. And in order to zero out the bottom line, you have to change either the expenditure budgets or the mill rate. Because the revenue is not going to change. The revenue is the revenue. Unless we have, something come up with different tax scenarios, but as of now, we're using the numbers that we have.
So you sent out a spreadsheet that said 642.59. Do I have the right thing here?
I have a grand list of 640, 259, 115, and it's 118. It's
Oh, okay. That's
it's
the only-
within, I
All right.
wouldn't worry about that.
Good, okay.
I was using, Bob,
Like,
yeah,
the thing that you sent us a few minutes ago or a little while ago, is the number that's on there the correct number we're working with? 23,908,194.063, as far as what our revenues are?
say that again.
Thought you sent us the link to work with sent me a piece of paper that said link for revenues, and here, I'll bring it to you.
23,908.
Yes, okay, yes,
184.
yeah,
Okay,
yep.
so that's what we have to work with.
That's what we have to work with, yep.
Okay, and then the next one down is the proposed budget is a total 24,607 is what everybody's asking for.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
So basically, if you look at, is that a different one? Yeah, is that a new? Okay, okay, that's one that you have.
Yes, it's not the one that was.
It's not the one that I emailed earlier.
I don't have that.
You can't save that to your USB. I did include you in that email. All right, so in short, if you're looking at draft 4, the fourth draft of the selectmen's budget, in A1, the A1 section, you have the very top line, A100 is 18,213,323. And what that number represents is 98.5% of the total grand list multiplied by the current mill rate of 0.02888. Okay, there you go. I'm just going to come up and just kind of point things out. Perfect. Now, do we have a microphone, one that works? Yes? So we have the grand list over here. Multiply that by 0.02888. If we budgeted at 100% tax collection, that's what that number would represent. That happened last year, and we don't do that. We budget at 98.5 collection because we don't collect all the taxes. So that's basically your A100 number. We have additional taxes that are in the budget. The short-term investments that we make is the 100,000. Intergovernmental, and these are all on draft 4 of the budget. Licenses, fees, fines, and charges, and other revenue. So the total revenue without any adjustments, 23,908,194. And then we have all the budgets, now that we have the Board of Education budget of the new one of 16,436,326. We have 24,607,325. So we're in the red at 699,131. That's where we're starting.
So what would the mill rate be if we said yes? Let's open with that one.
Okay.
Before we decide.
Yeah. 100%.
Well, a mill is.
Suzanne, if you would put in the mill rate section, the top left, yep. Put in 0.29, 0.029. That didn't move much, right? So you gotta think like 699,000 is probably over a mill. It's probably 1.2 or something like that. So you're gonna have to go to 29 point, let's go 29.88. All right, we're still short 68 grand. So point, yeah, point. Yeah, 0.3.
Yeah.
0.03. Now we're putting 7,000 back into the kitty.
Does anyone have an appetite for that? I open
How
that
much
to
is
the
that
audience too.
Yeah, that would
I mean,
represent.
that's why this tool is the best tool to have to say, all right, how do we feel about going from 0.288 to 0.3, 0.03?
I don't see anybody saying they're all in on that. So it seems to me that we need to decide where we're going to push back. Anybody else?
That's just, there we go. In addition to doing this, it's also helpful to kind of see what that would do to individual tax bills. Because this is a great big picture and this is really very helpful with bringing it down to what it would represent to the average taxpayer in North Stonington in additional taxes. That too would be helpful.
All right, let's just say you have a $250,000 assessment. Then go 0.02888. $7,200.
Right now.
Right.
Now, that's what we-
So your bill if you were at a $250,000 assessment at 0.02888, you're at $7,200. Point 3. 0.03. $300. Extra $300. Doesn't sound like much, but if you're on a fixed income, Brian,
But it's also a tax increase on automotive and everything else.
and so. I mean, we all knew that, the numbers that were coming out were going to cause this type of scenario. And the question, as always, becomes, where do you go to reduce that $699 number that we start with.
So Dan, just checking my math, because I'm just doing it on my phone.
I am too.
$300 increase on a $7,200 tax bill outside of cars and all that. It's a 4% increase. Is that right?
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
But then what people need to understand is most of us all have mortgages, and when you escrow your mortgage taxes, if you have a shortfall, they say, hey, you have a $300 bill this year extra. Well, we're gonna charge you double.
Yeah.
So it's more like they're gonna try to collect, unless you pay it in full, they're gonna charge you the 600 because you can't go in the shortfall. So it's not really a 300, it's more like a $600 increase.
You know, I don't want to bench it off a number based on an arbitrary or an average, assumed average
It's-
home value.
True.
If we said 4%,
It's-
based on the ask from the town,
Yep.
we're looking at, if we were going to absorb it, it'd be a 4% increase regardless of the value of your home.
Only on the home, not
Right.
including the property taxes, any vehicle or any,
4% across the board.
4% across the board on everything.
Much more difficult to do, but comparison to that to other towns in the area. What, for a like assessed property, what they would be paying for taxes. That too has to be something we consider. I think.
So you look at that. We have 4 places. Government operating, debt, education, capital. Debt, you're not doing anything with. Capital, 754,091. And this is why the undesignated fund in the policy is still part of the discussion as we move forward. Because if we do go above our 17%, the only way to not move that mill rate number. So if you put that mill rate number back at 0.02888, we have 699,131. Just below where it says total estimated revenues at 28.88 mil, there's a blank space for adding money from the undesignated fund. That would change the operational revenue number to whatever. You would have to put $700,000 in there to come out in the black. Can you just do that just for,
So even at 17.04, we have 1 year to act by policy.
we don't have to act within that year. We have to, if it's above 17% for 1 year, we have to come up with a plan to reduce it to below 17% using mill rate reduction or debt reduction. And my argument is, based upon our the fact that we're the fiscal board for the town, you can lower the mill rate for people by not increasing the mill rate in the first place. And we've done exactly what that $700,000 done in the past during COVID. And the problem with what we did at that time was that we were plugging budgetary holds that were revolving expenses, meaning that those things would have come back the year again, the year again, the year again. I would never propose that we do that. But I would say if we need to buy something that's a one-time purchase to avoid a mill rate going up, then that's part of it. I'm not saying we don't reduce budgets as much as we can, but that last little bit, we do have room to move within that undesignated fund to add money to that line. So it's a combination of reducing one or two of the budget expenses along with adding money from the undesignated to get below the 17%. Does everyone follow me?
Yeah, the only thing I would say is if you do knock it down by the 699, if we went for the whole thing, where are we going to get 699 next year to cover what we're doing right now?
It would only be if we had some, and that's why we have to look at this capital plan and say, what in here is a one-time expense that's driving that capital budget that isn't going to be there next year or the year after, or the year after, the year after. It's an expense that of something that we need,
Back up.
but isn't not a recurring budgetary item.
So I don't know where we are in the agenda. So
We have 3 items that we're talking
Yeah, yeah.
about.
I know. So, I mean, there's a lot of approaches that could be taken here. And spending down the undesignated fund, in my opinion, needs to be addressed after we decide whether we're okay with the municipal budget and the educational budget. And frankly, I'm not there yet.
And I don't disagree with you, Gary, one bit. I'm not saying that it's one or the other, or you do one first. I think you're looking at the budget, expense budgets, and you're deciding what's your tolerance. What is their tolerance for reducing it as much as they can? But you can't do that in just a vacuum. You have to say, we have, so much room that they don't have to absorb $699, they have to absorb $499, or they have to absorb $399.
Yeah, so I struggle with that approach because we're still looking at the undesignated fund as the savior. And my opinion is get your expense budgets right first, and then decide if they're not right, how you're going to deal with it. You're either going to try to buy it down from the undesignated fund or raise the mill rate. But we don't start with how much are we willing to spend down the undesignated fund. I think that's philosophically, I'm not on that same page.
I don't mind that opinion, Gary.
To one other thing, how confident are we in the income from intergovernment license, the other revenue? Are those numbers firm? Can we count on that? Is that something that could significantly change? We're talking about sources of revenue, and I'm just looking at the intergovernment, the license fees, et cetera, and the other revenue. Are those numbers, what level of confidence do we have that those are the numbers that we're going to see happen?
We're very confident, Lou, because there's things we didn't put in there, like the permits for EV, the permits for the new wiring, so on. So we didn't want to put those in and have them not happen. So I'm pretty confident that number's
So
fine.
those, including the intergovernment, because That's the money from the state. We're going-
Yeah, so we only have the governor's proposed budget at this point. If anything, that may go up a hair if they put some of the ECS funds back in. But we're going with it now because we've never waited for the governor's final budget before we did our budget, because that might not happen until May or June. So, yeah, we're pretty confident that's not going to go down anymore.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike. So do we need to decide how much we want to spend for where our thing is going to be and then ask everybody to come back again? As far as with their budgets?
Well, I think we can all agree that out of those four numbers, that debt is off the table. Would you all agree?
As of right now, yes. But I would also say I would,
There's nothing we're
There's
doing with
nothing,
debt.
well.
Yeah.
We could maybe pay some down if we got lucky, but we
Right.
can't not meet, this is the minimum.
This is, yeah,
obligation.
right.
that's the minimum we
right,
gotta pay.
Right,
We have to do this.
exactly.
As far as the capital, we've been fighting for 3 years to keep the capital, so we're not in the,
Agreed. So let's, as a matter of agreement, the pieces that are in play, that if we did nothing would total 754 or 91, is there any appetite to change that number? Or request that number be changed?
Yeah, but we wouldn't change it at that point. We would just utilize a different funding source, right?
Yeah,
I think that's where the capital is the one that's the most flexible for us to, not to cut, but to be able to find, doesn't have to be it's not year over year, the same every year. So like if we have a little bump this year, it can be partially paid by undesignated fund, and it doesn't impact what capital has to be next year because it's not operating budget. It's not year over year consumption. So I think leave it, because I think if we need flexibility, we have it already.
Unless you can go out and buy the loader,
Yeah,
100%, that takes that payment. So you're not taking a payment only for this year just to buy it down. And then next year you're gonna have the same payment, which then you'd have a
Agreed.
shortfall. If you can go and start knocking off some of the capital that has, yeah, we're sharing mics. So if we wanted to, we could go out and buy the loader. We can go buy other pieces that are one-time buys, or, we just buy the lease out. Bob,
Yeah.
do we have penalties on buying those leases out? Okay.
I agree. All I'm saying is I don't think the amount needs to change. I think how we choose to fund it, we have some flexibility because of the nature of capital. So I agree with you.
All right, so I'm just trying to narrow the issues. I mean, obviously, so we have 4 lines and 2 are certainly not going to go down. We have a floor for debt and capital. Does anyone have a suggestion with regard to the government operating budget?
I'm looking at this and saying that the government operating budget is assuming a $100,000 cost from the school system. And as Bob points out, if you remove that, their increase is 2.4% year over year. That's pretty much in line with inflation and just general cost pressures. So we've gone through it. And I just really don't see a place within that budget to get to the $700,000 that we need to get to. I mean, that's just a big take from that budget. My opinion.
I have a suggestion for a small edit to the government budget, nothing that's going to move the needle on the $700,000, but
Just
I'd
make
like-
sure you're speaking to the mic.
I'd like
Please.
to see us consider a combination of sections B23 and B29. I mentioned this before, so this is B23, which is social services and welfare, and B29, which is senior citizens. I'd like for the Board of Selectmen to consider combining those two entities. Looking at changing the senior center coordinator to a different role, making it a full-time position. Taking the total budget from a roughly 150,000, maybe reducing that to 120,000. And eliminating or reducing some of the line items from the B23 section and focusing more on North Stonington residents.
If I were to mention anything about the Board of Selectmen budget, that's what I would mention as well. It's just keeping the social welfare to our town. Between Mrs. Costanza, what she's doing and, what Sarah's doing, it just needs to stay local with our taxpayer money, so.
And we said that you wouldn't know how much it would move the needle. Do you have a number that it's gonna move, how much it's gonna move?
So combined B23 and B29 right now is $146,558. I think that we could probably reduce that by about $20,000, which is not much, but I think that there's some savings to be had there. I mentioned previously that we're supporting 15 organizations between those two broader line items. And as our demographics change, I really feel like we're going to need to see a shift to more of the elderly in our town. And so I think that we just need to think broader about that. And so that's why I'm advocating for a position that I think would be more broader social services that would cover both senior services and social services and focus on allocating the funds across our social services. So maybe that would take away some of the work that the selectman has to do in trying to figure out the best place to put the money. And if we had someone that was their role in kind of understanding each of those entities, where the funds are going and who they were helping, I think it would both take some of the work off of the selectman plate and potentially help our citizens a little bit more. Especially as needs grow and like I said, our demographics change. So again, this is monetarily, it's not moving the needle and it's not a big discussion point for this budget season. I just think it's a change that we need to address and maybe now is the time to do it, given the opportunity.
All right. So just taking a look at it sort of from a big picture, I'm not commenting on your comment, Winona. I think there's a lot of good thoughts in there. I just want to kind of go back up to the 50,000 foot level. So the two budgets that we have to address, if we all generally agree that we can't absorb a $699,000 increase, is basically the Board of Selectmen, or the municipal government and the Board of Education budget. More than anything, I want to make sure our children have what they need from an education perspective, but I also want to make sure that we put forward a budget that passes. And I am concerned that at a 6.5% increase, that's a budget that's highly likely to get shot down when we go to referendum. So I think that's probably the elephant in the room that we need to start talking about.
I would agree. We left last week with the review of the school budget, and I have more than a few questions about that budget. So that's where speaking of the elephant in the room, that's the big one. So we have to come to some sort of an understanding, answer some questions about that, and then start to make some tough decisions. I think that's where I'm not going to say low hanging fruit. That's not what I'm looking at. I'm looking at just what's in there and what we might need to do to make some changes.
Sorry, I guess I was on. So I want to go back to a question that I had last week for you, Stephanie, and this is just my blatant ignorance of how the process works. So I hope that you can entertain me. Can you just explain for us how the process works with contracting? Because I had run the numbers and I said last week, look, I noticed that for the salaries, I saw a lot of like 5 and 6% increases. And the answer was, oh, it's the last year of the contract. So that's an increase and a step. So can you explain how that works and what does that actually mean? And how do we get there? So what is the timing? We're coming out of a contract, we're going into a contract. So what does that mean?
It's 50-50.
Okay. When it stops working, just yell. So I have on this Zoom call, I have Superintendent Hopkins as well as Kathy Trammell, who can jump in if you want to recognize them. They have a much more sophisticated understanding of this than I do. So Winona, this is year 3 of a 3-year contract. And we'll start negotiating our next contract, I believe, in July. So this contract came with 3 point, and I don't know what that number is I can look up the contract in a minute, if that's helpful, % increase. And then there's a step increase for a number of teachers, right? So when you've been teaching for a number of years, then you bump up to the next step. And so you not only have a percentage increase in your pay, but you have an increase that comes with that step. So when you're looking at salaries, Winona, were you assessing salaries just for teachers, or were you also assessing them when you did your big math for like administrators, paras? So they all run on separate contracts. So our administrators are in a contract, the paras and the custodians are in a separate contract, and then we have the teachers in their contracts. So if you're doing one assessment, you're sort of looking at a mishmash of all of those things together.
Do you have a number for the amount of increase, the percentage increase for just those contractual obligations under your union contracts? What would that, because we talked before about not being able to do anything about the debt, we have to pay that.
Right.
So there's a number that we have to pay because it's a contractually obligated number.
Right.
Do you know what that number is?
I can give you that number if you give me a couple minutes to do the math.
Okay.
Are there other questions you want me to answer here? And is that every contractual obligation that I have? So my salaries for the teachers, the administrators,
And
the paras, the
custodian,
custodians, in addition to their health insurance, that sort of, so the cost to employ our staff. Is that what you're asking?
What we
for?
are contractually obligated to pay. If we can maintain the same level of staffing.
Yeah.
What
Sure.
are we contractually obligated to pay under the unions?
Right.
Okay.
And as you will, I mean, we talk about every year, right? That's the vast majority of what our expenses are.
Mhm.
But sure, I can come up with that number for you.
The other thing is, I'd asked for an organizational chart. You got one, so thank you
Yeah.
very much. That was very helpful.
That was all Kathy and Troy's doing.
Well, it was very good, very informative. I do have one question on here. It doesn't appear the athletic director is identified on this chart.
So my understanding is the athletic director falls under the high school, middle school principal. Kristen, I think, is online. Kristen, is that true? I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
This is Troy.
Yes,
and yes,
that's true. That's true.
Thank you both.
And just something else from this one. What is the Cub Club director?
So the Cub Club is that new before and after care program that we spoke about last week. That's something that we started this past year. It's not in our budget because it's self-funding. So we charge parents, and the cost that we charge the parents pays the salary of our staff. We have allocated, if you look at our non-lapsing fund, like a chunk of money in there in case we were to ever run in the red one month. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Again, I appreciate getting this. This was helpful.
Good. I'm glad. Anything else you want me to answer before I come up with your number?
I do have, if nobody else.
Keep going. Yeah. Go for it.
Yeah, Lou, please, you're the numbers guy.
Yeah. In looking at this year's budget, proposed budget to the forecast, so we still are confident with the forecast that we have going forward. I mean,
Kathy is reforecasting every month. So
Mhm.
I feel very confident with her numbers.
okay. For the current year, if you look at the salaries for the educational standpoint, the educational costs, special education, regular teachers, the occupational therapist, the social worker, the paraprofessionals, and you look at the percentage of the budget that represents, the number forecast for next year is less than what it is for what we forecast for this year.
I would imagine that could have something to do with losing the IT director.
No, that's a separate line.
Okay. Which line are you talking about?
If you look at let's just use line 1.
Okay.
Teacher's regular salary. In the forecast, that represents 47.5% of your total budget that you're spending. The proposed budget, that equals 46.6%. So it's a 1-point drop. Now the dollar amount's going up, but the percent of the budget, it's going down. And so that happens again with special ed teachers. It doesn't happen it's a push on the line 3. With the paraprofessionals, it's a push as well. So that difference gets absorbed someplace else. And it appears that it's getting absorbed in the administrative side of the budget. So what I'm looking at here is why that has happened.
Can I phone a friend here? Kathy, are you available to answer the question?
I am available, and I don't have that spreadsheet in front of me, but are you looking also at the increase in transportation of 25% and the increase in benefits, specifically health of 11% to offset that increase in salary?
Well, I do recognize that that went up. But as a percentage of the budget, none of the administrative costs went down. So it's all just a question of how we're absorbing those additional costs that have nothing to do with delivering the education. So that's
I'm not
what
sure
I'm
I'm
asking.
not sure I'm following your question, but perhaps Kathy follows it better than I do. I'm just
No, but
wondering.
when you talk about all the administrative costs, you're not just looking at the central office salaries, you're looking at purchase services, et cetera, right?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so well, just to run them down, central office is line 7 and then 37 through 49. And if you look at those, just using the central office, the other expenses, the projected, it's 1.1% of the budget for this year. Next year, it's 1.5%. So that's a 0.5 point increase in the central office expenses, lines 38 through 49.
I think one of the most significant increases in the central office services is that line for contract negotiations. That line is way bigger this year.
Mhm.
And that's put in there because we're going into a negotiation year. So you'll see that that line's projected to be $50,000 next year, which is $41,000 higher.
That's half
Than
of the
this year.
increase.
Sure. And then if you look, our fiscal services, which we talked about last time, so that's the training and the support that we're getting at the central office from Learn, as well as Tyler Technologies that supports our Infinite Visions,
Mhm.
our HR support, that sort of stuff.
If I could speak to that Tyler Technology too, this year we had so many credits from prior year overpayments that we really didn't owe Tyler any money. Whereas next year, we're going to have to pay a full year of premiums to them of maintenance of about $25,000.
So if we were under, where did it go? Where was it consumed? So if we, assuming Kathy or Suzanne, sorry, Kathy, my mind's misfiring. If we were favorable there this year, where was it consumed?
A good deal of it was consumed in offsetting, the extra payments to the federal government for the tax snafu, increases in software usage. But when we went and looked at Tyler Technologies for this year,
Right.
I don't want to say it was free, but it really was free because we had so many credits from overpayments that $25,000 did not hit this year's budget, but will hit next year's budget.
Okay, thank you.
Lou, I don't know if that's starting to answer some of your question about why that percent is bigger.
I think we just created a liaison from the Board of Finance to the Board of Education for the future budgets.
Sure.
You will
Yeah.
now be part of every meeting at the Board of Education for the next.
Just as long as I have to do.
Would you like a name tag?
It only.
We've been saying it for years. We need a Board of Finance liaison and
We have.
and I love these are the conversations, that, someone who is a numbers person and does this, Gary and Lou, let's talk about bigger picture tolerances. You know, because we have numbers and you look, let's look at on page 16 of the materials that the Board of Education presented to us last week.
Sorry if I don't have that. In the binder.
You have the presentation from the Board of Education. Anyway, it's basically, it's a 10-year, it's a graph about the budget increases for the last 10 years. It's page 16.
Yeah.
Budget history. All right, so if you included a 6.46% budget increase for this year, which just for the folks at home, what is that number? That number is $997,405. Almost $1 million is the increase that we're looking at. Right. So just for conversation, let's say if we as a board say we want that increase cut in half. So you get an increase of 3.23%, which equals 497,493. And Suzanne, if you could add that to, it's added to what was in the budget last year, which was 15,400,325. So the increase would be 15,897,756 in that number where you have blocked right there. 15,897,756. 756. No period in there. All right, well, something's missing. You got to take the 700 out of the undesignated fund. Okay. So that's why this tool is really good. You know, we're showing. And if you were to be given a 3.23% increase and you spread it out over that 10-year period, your 10-year average would be 2.26 rather than 2.58. And now we have 165.61. What would a mill rate have to be to lose that 161? So try 29. All right, we got way too much there. 29.2. Yeah, it's gonna be 0.0292. Okay. You went up 0.04 mils. And we have a balanced budget.
So I have another approach, and it's not going to come across well, so, but I gotta say it. Stephanie, put the scissors down.
Deeply offended.
But if we, knowing that this budget for the educational budget will become the baseline for next year's educational budget, and we're in a contract year and there's some relative softness in where those numbers are going to land, I am whirling around in my mind between that and where we are with the undesignated fund. I have a proposal where we bake into the educational budget an increase from last year, only what's contractually required. And anything new that comes up that requires it, that they can't be solved out of the school's undesignated fund, comes to the town for an appropriation, which comes out of the town's undesignated fund with the taxpayer's approval. And I know there's concern that, if we do that and the taxpayers don't agree to it, then we have an issue. But aren't we putting the decision-making where it should be?
I guess,
No, I'm scratching the top of my head. It's out of the box. It's completely out of the box. Thank you. Crazy.
I just don't know if you budget that way. You're budgeting basically at a loss, assuming that you're going to be under budget and you're going to have to come back to the town for.
And conversely, adding conservatism into a budget that may not come to fruition sets the baseline for next year's budget, which is not the way we should be handling. the
What
taxpayer
do the
money.
numbers look like? You know?
Well, hold
Well, I'm
on,
waiting for the number from Stephanie, so.
Steph,
So-
if you wait one second.
Sure.
On that point. So
Sarah.
there, yeah, she has more math to crunch for a minute. So some of you will remember this, but I sat here and got scolded quite a bit by some conservative people whose names I shall not mention at this meeting. No,
Oh, good.
no, like we all did for misrepresenting the budget. So when we would go to appropriation multiple times in a year,
Mhm.
the question was, well, why wasn't this in the budget in the first place? And so that we did that. We did that a few years ago, prior to joining Gary, but, and I, and so that's another perspective.
I'm always up for a good scolding.
I do like the idea of knowing what that number is, and I know you're working on it as far as the contractual obligations. But one of the other big increases would be insurance. And that's out of our control as far, we're in the consortium, we're buying our insurance that way. So
That's right.
And then the other.
It's
big-
tied to our staff.
Right.
And Kathy's numbers, she went through and actually sort of did individual person by individual person to come up with that number. So it's not just an estimate or like a
solid.
general increase applied.
Right. And then you are making a pretty good guess on what transportation is going to cost next year, because that's a significant increase over even the forecast for this year.
So part of that's our new contract. So we just signed our brand new 5-year transportation contract that came with it. It was a significant increase.
Mhm.
Probably in the grand scheme of things, it's totally fair. M&J has been very good to us over the years, and they are the only company that bids on our contract. But it's $125,000 contractual increase before you even start talking about things like fuel or additional stuff that we have.
Steph, the other significant increase that's not contractual is technology,
That's very true.
465,000. Can you explain more about all the technology costs?
Sure. So
What they're used for?
part of what you saw in the presentation last week was talking about the new sustainable technology plan. So much like the capital plan in the town, we felt like we've always been just wildly stabbing at what we need for technology. And I think that people have varying tolerance levels, and that's okay. But when you hear the principals speak about how children are learning, how the curriculum that we're using is being delivered, we have to be really, really careful to make sure that we're supporting our kids and giving them the things that they need to do that. So, Amy, I'm struggling to find your number of the $400,000 increase. Can you just, so line 90 is technology, and at the bottom, it says 299. So line 95 would say that we're budgeting 299.
I'm looking at this one.
Oh, the software line.
The whole shebang.
So this line though is bigger and we talked about that.
So part of the increase that you're seeing is in our software, and you can see that list that was emailed to all of you, what those software costs are. I have to again give credit to Kathy for going through all of that and sort of weeding out some stuff that was redundant in our software. So I think that that line probably isn't as large as it might have been if no one did that. Our sustainable technology plan, really, again, I liken it to your capital list. It's a long-term plan of what we need to do every year to make sure that we're delivering that in a way that stays steady. So I'm not going to be looking for a huge increase one year and no increase another year. We've taken a chunk of that technology and we've moved it into our non-lapsing account because we identify that as something, while we don't love the idea of purchasing it out of that, because we do believe that we need year after year, we will need
How much you taking
technology.
out in non-lapsing?
It's $122,000.
Added to the 465.
You can see it. Sure. Yeah, you can see it
Yeah, it's
on the back page. So I guess what I'm saying is this line item isn't nearly as big as it started. And so that's going to include trading out our teacher desktops for laptops. So we're no longer replacing desktops in the classroom, but teachers need to have computers in order to teach the students. It's part of our one-to-one program, and it's making sure that that program's sustainable. Those computers are only good for 5 years, and then they're no longer supported, a Google Chromebook. And so we have to constantly replace them.
Do you know how much it is? So I don't have to go through all the paperwork. Adding computers for the 5th and 6th graders. So every student will have a laptop.
5 through 8.
5.
No, I'm sorry, 6 through 8.
Okay, so not the 5th graders.
I don't think so. Troy, do you remember? Can you tell me, or Kristen, is that 5 to 8 or grade 6 through 8?
And can you just tell me the benefits of every child having a computer?
You just let them speak.
Stephanie?
Yes, hi.
Hi, it's Kim Haggerty. I was working on the sustainable tech plan if you want to
Oh,
answer some of
thanks,
these
Kim.
questions. Yep. So in terms of the students having laptops, they're not going to be issued in grades 5, 6, 7, and 8. What happens is a cohort of 5th graders will be issued a device, and that will follow them until they get to 9th grade, where they'll be issued a new device. So you're really only purchasing 2 sets each year. So that's kind of the thought there, that these would age with the kids. In terms of the software, that really just represents a shifting. A lot of, when we were looking through all the teacher recs, a lot of the texts were kind of tech-based, or they at least had some major components that teachers needed to access online. And by moving them to software and looking at that instructionally, we were able to remove some redundancies and then also just have more control over the software that runs between buildings. So we do have a couple of applications that go from K to 9. We have a couple that go from 6 to 8. So having kind of that be more by district instead of by department made a little bit more sense.
Kim, I wonder if you want to speak a little bit to, I think, what Amy's sort of broader question is. And I don't think that I'm in the position to answer it because I don't run the school, but you all do. I think Amy's asking, what's the benefit of moving in a direction of such tech-based instruction? And at some point, Amy, you're absolutely right. We made a shift.
Yep. So I will start by saying I don't think any of our teachers are going to completely replace paper with a Chromebook, and that a good educational experience definitely takes into the account diverse learners, but there are more and more circumstances where we are finding that we do need more up-to-date devices. So for example, all of our testing and universal screeners have moved online. And to get that data on our kids and be able to provide appropriate intervention, they really do need a device. The state has even mandated some of that testing be done through a device. So that kind of really is the impetus to increase that usage at the elementary school specifically. We also have had some of these devices aging out. So when kids are logging on, it's taking them 20 minutes of instructional time when they could be getting on much more quickly if the device was issued directly to them. There are quite a few applications that students have been really enjoying and using, and we've seen data that supports that. This year, we really switched to using IXL as our method of enforcing student skills and also screening. And we had a meeting today going over how wonderful our mid-year numbers are and how kids are really starting to get concepts in class, and we can see that demonstrated virtually. We have a math program that is using the Chromebooks. And then we also have kind of several interactive science programs that are using them as well. And our students are becoming a lot more savvy and able to integrate what they're learning digitally too, and kind of go back and forth. But we need to streamline the way we do that. And kind of, I'm working with teachers a lot to develop instructional methods that are cutting edge, that are innovative. And a lot of it does require some usage of Chromebooks.
Thanks, Kim. Amy, did that sort of answer your broader question? I understand that you philosophically don't love the direction that this is headed.
And then I'm also looking at the benefit to the kids.
Right. So I think Kim talked to the benefit of the kids. Does that satisfy that for you?
No, but thank you.
I guess maybe I get that it's not going to satisfy because you philosophically disagree with it, but does it give you sort of an understanding of where we are coming from, at least as a school? Okay.
It's just a really big number for the town to swallow for the direction that it's moving.
Sure. I'm still struggling, Amy. I don't know if we're looking at a different version. So I'm looking at the budget sheet that Kathy emailed out, and under the technology line 90 to 95, the total for next year is 299,049. That includes the software and software licenses, new equipment, computer network and repairs, as well as tech consortium / tech support.
So what is this on page 2?
I think we're just,
the total on page 2.
you're looking maybe at a different
So
budget.
that brings me to the question of why are there different spreadsheets with different numbers?
I'm just talking about what I think it's probably organized differently, but I'm not sure. Are you looking at the most recent version?
I'm looking at the packet that was, yeah.
To take a slightly different tack, you're looking, Amy, on the sheet that was sent out, and I've kind of marked it up, where you just lumped everything together under technology.
That's what I did.
In the proposed budget of 299 for next year,
Yeah.
right?
Amy's number is significantly bigger than that 299. That's why I was just asking.
I'm just trying to compare it. The way where she doesn't.
Unless you're
her-
pulling
your
numbers
version
from some
doesn't have-
other
it doesn't-
spot that you would think might fall under technology.
No, Amy's sheet clearly shows that all there. I'm wondering, Amy, if that was before we had moved things out of the non-lapsing.
It's still a large number.
It is certainly a large number.
I'm just trying to look at the budget to see where there can be adjustments because most of it cannot be adjusted. So
I
mean,
totally agree
unless
with you.
there is a cut in a position. So
Right. I think that with very little flexibility, any significant cut will interrupt staff or services to students for sure. Lou, I'm still working
whether
on
it
your
comes
number.
out of, no matter where it comes from, it's still a number. So even if we added the numbers together from the non-lapsing, it's still a number that people are paying for a service to the kids.
Right. So and the benefit of using the non-lapsing is that amount of money has already been paid by the taxpayer. And so we're not asking them to pay for it again, nor are we asking to allow that number to inflate our bottom line, which as we've all talked about ad nauseum, that number doesn't necessarily roll back so easily. So we took it out saying, if we put it here, it's not an increased cost to the taxpayer this year.
Okay, and then let me just speak to some other concerns. These
Sure.
aren't just my concerns, but
Yeah, it's okay.
concerns we've heard is that when you add in the technology component, it's year after year of fees and services, and continuation of
Absolutely.
that. I mean, you're bringing it up level upon level upon level, and we have to keep meeting that standard.
I think it's probably akin to what textbook replacement was. If you see that that line doesn't, it's not really a thing anymore. So our software licenses and our curriculum is now being delivered in this way. So that's why that number has gotten bigger. So the math program that you'll see, we have to this year buy our 6-year program. One of the other programs, this year's the big buy, and then the next 3 are consumables. It's the way that we're delivering curriculum now.
Correct. Okay.
Can I just follow up on that?
Sure.
Is with it, the books, technology, supplies. Do I have this right, that at the beginning of the school year, the students are given a list of the supplies they need to bring into the school?
Every teacher develops a supply list. I don't know that they need to. I mean, if a child didn't have them, it would be provided for them. But a lot of that comes out of the teacher's pocket as well.
Okay, well, that might even be worse.
I would agree.
So what I'm hearing is that the supply budget line item in this is not sufficient to take care of the needs of the classroom.
I don't think that there's ever been a year, and I don't know that there's ever a school. Right, if you talk to your friends from other districts, I think every kid gets a supply list from a teacher every year. And I think, yeah, we probably have to do better. And philosophically, if we could inflate that line to make that a reality, it would be wonderful. I don't think it's realistic.
Except that when we're talking about a budget increase, a possible budget increase that might impact taxpayers to the tune of $300 or $400 a year, if you've got 2 or 3 kids in the school system and they get a list that says, please bring in another $100 worth of supplies each, that's just another form of taxing.
It's a huge expense on a parent.
But I guess my question.
I don't think it's that much each, but it is significant. It certainly feels that way in August.
Yeah. So, well, that's what the feedback I've gotten. So to me, that's just a deferral to some other form of tax. So
I guess one could argue that it's shouldered by a parent and not every member of the community. So I'm not spreading that over every resident.
And I guess I also have it seems to me unfair to expect. I know teachers do this on their own because they love doing it, but it also seems to me to be unfair to ask teachers to take money out of their pocket to take care of the school building, to take care of that kind of thing. I just don't think that's fair.
I wouldn't disagree with you.
So that would mean that line item would need to increase.
Are you advocating that line item increases?
My wife
Oh,
does
as
it
a
every
matter of
year.
fact, I am, and we could find the money. So, yeah.
All right. I mean, these are all good discussions. You know, it's a fine line between, all right, let's get into policy and decisions that are really the Board of Education and the district's decision making. Ours is a question of how much money do we have to give. I've given a proposal. There's questions that are pending. What are the exact contractual obligations that are caught, and what is the percentage of that increase that's solely contractual? So we can compare that. And then, I mean, that's kind of where we are. I mean, if you're talking $20,000 on the government side, probably something under 50 or 60,000 that you could possibly squeeze the Board of Selectmen to cut. Me personally, if it comes down to the end and we have to ask for a certain, reduction on their side, I think that'd be appropriate to talk about then. But right now, we need that information from you. We have a meeting on Wednesday. When's your next meeting?
The following Monday, so a week from today.
A week from today.
I think to your point, Mike, about our budget and us having to control it. I agree, but I think that it's important to hear from you all, even about your philosophical differences with our budget, because I think it does represent what your constituents might be saying to you. And that's important for us to hear as we're considering this budget. I mean,
And I don't disagree. I just,
yeah,
we have,
certainly, right. It's a large budget and you've got a lot to pick through. And so talking about the benefits or negative aspects of technology, maybe that doesn't get us there. But I do think it's important to be able to air it and for people in the public to hear rationale behind that as well.
Right.
So I never mind.
Mike, I, just to maybe add to your proposal, I have a question. What year, so I'm looking at your budget history. What year was the last contractual, what year was the last like Yeah, I know. So I'm trying to map it to the higher spikes in the budget.
So I think year one would have been 23, 24. Of the,
So, yeah,
just the
so that's
teacher's
your-
contract.
that's your
Remember, that's not,
4%,
we're
yeah.
not on the same contract cycle with every contract, but that's the
Sure.
big one.
So, and that sort of tracks back that either the year of the contract negotiation or the year right after, we kind of had to take a big hit. So I don't think 3.23% is really going to be achievable without cutting staff on their side. I would rather see something in probably the 4% range, similar to previous years where there were contractual increases.
So why, sorry, Sarah, and this is respectfully. You and I share a similar work history. Why is staff reduction passe or not acceptable? I mean, our enrollment's going down. Shouldn't our staff adapt?
Can I just speak to that real fast?
Wait.
Okay. All right. It was a misnomer the other night, the idea of our declining enrollment. I want to be really clear that while this year we see, I think 8 less kids, right, in our school system, this is something that sort of tracks up and down. We're really flat. And when you look at the long-term projections, we're flat. So it was said so many times the other night and I should have corrected it and I didn't. And I feel really badly that I didn't. So we are not in a period of declining enrollment. It just is that this class that's graduating is bigger and the class that's coming in this year is smaller, but we are tracked to be flat, just like we always are.
But it ebbs and flows. I mean, last year's graduating class was very low.
It was very small. And this one's a little bigger.
But I'm just saying.
I guess I don't want to get caught in the idea that we're in a period of declining enrollment. We are 8 kids down this projected this current year.
1.6% down in enrollment overall.
Right, but not
6.5% increase in budget.
For sure, but not longitudinally. I just don't want to say
okay,
declining enrollment makes me nervous.
Okay.
I got a lot of texts about declining enrollment.
Sorry.
Okay, keep going, Gary. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
So I think, just to answer your question, having been in the schools, both schools now, I have kids in both schools. I don't know where you cut. Like you've got 1 teacher per class, you've got a handful of paras, most of those subsidized or paid for by special education. So that's coming from state funding. And then you have sort of the critical infrastructure that you need, social services, counseling, all of that. So and we don't want to cut art or music, or again, all those are simply 1 teacher each per school. I think, I know when there were some discussions around if they had to, what were they going to cut? And it was going to be an elementary school reading specialist, which seems horrifying to me because that's where we need our specialists is in the elementary school. And for better or for worse, the high school, middle school already has what appears to be more resources than the elementary school. Maybe on purpose because they need less resources, or maybe I don't know. But I just, yeah.
It's not our place to say where the cut should come, but I don't think we should say that we're against cutting anywhere. I mean, I'd like to see what it looks like. And my opinion is we're in a bit of what I tongue in cheek call a COVID hangover. I mean, we had a couple years where staff augmentation was picked up by COVID available funding, and then we hired them full time, and now all of a sudden, in my eyes, numerically, not by anything else, it just seems like we're heavy on staff.
So I would say we have not yet even fully, like, I don't think we're going to have, I don't think we're going to get a break from COVID until the last group of kids graduates that went through a massive break in their educational opportunity or were stuck in houses for 2 years. Like there's a lot there. So, and I'm not saying that it's as acute as it was before, but my daughter certainly lost 2 years of reading opportunity at the most critical points of her career, her school career, 2nd and 3rd grade. So did 60 other kids, right? And other ones that were in older grades that I don't have that experience with lost other opportunities. So I think it's fair what you say, but I don't think we're gonna see that relief until probably my youngest, who was in preschool during COVID, who I finally enrolled in preschool because she was losing her mind at home. Like, and we were one of the lucky families we could afford to have a nanny come in and take care of her while my husband and I worked. But it was like it was crazy. And so anyway, sorry, I have a tendency to overshare in these meetings, but I don't disagree with you. It's not our place to say what the cuts, like what they should cut or cut. But if we're offering guidance, and my one opinion on the board of all of us, I think 3 is probably unachievable without some bone cutting, and we're cutting to the bone, and I would prefer not to see that. Although I have appreciated your approach in the past, where it says tell us what the impact would be, and then we make a decision from there. But that's just
So
my
I could
opinion.
tell you that 3.23, right, is that what you were saying? It's about $400,000. So that does not cover our contractual costs. So Troy and Kathy are sort of doing the math for me right now. And even at 5%, we're probably looking at a larger cut than we can take just with some of these, like the non-contractual things. And I'm going to be intentionally vague, mostly because the board hasn't gotten together to talk about what that might look like. And we haven't been advised by the superintendent or the administrators where they think if we had to do that, that would be.
Yeah, and I don't
but I
really
think-
want you to do that.
Yeah.
I want, if we're gonna come back on Wednesday, and if you tell me we can't have, not until we have a chance to meet, which is gonna be Monday before our meeting, right? You're gonna meet,
We're going to meet 7 days from now.
right. Are
So
you
you'll
meeting
meet
at the
first
same-
on Wednesday.
Are you meeting at the same time?
We're meeting in that little room.
At 6:30? Is that what you come?
We are meeting at 6:30
All right.
in the
so-
little room.
You know, I want you to have those numbers solid. The way that in Sarah, I have a wife that's in special ed, and along with buying supplies and plenty of supplies for her kids at the beginning of the year because there's just no money for it. And I think it is district after district after district that happens. And maybe, that's just what happens because we don't want everybody in town paying for extra pencils when, the parents who have the kids in school might have to pony up that little bit more money. That's a fight for another day. The question is, I imagine there are contractual issues that have to be addressed with this budget and why there's an increase. There's also an underfunded budget from last year that has to be addressed in this budget. It seems like we had some.
I don't think it was underfunded. And I think that you can see that in the projections to year end. We're going to be in the black at the end of the year. I think what you're seeing is that we had to redistribute a lot of where we were going, which is blowing up those lines and then
All right, maybe
absorbing.
but there are line items that were
For sure.
were miscalculated that are coming back that don't change, and without recalibration and spreading the wealth, you're not really going to, you can't get away from the fact that there need to be increases in those line items.
Right. I'll reserve comment on that, Dan.
Poor accounting practices might have contributed to some of the increases that we're seeing in this budget that are inescapable. But cutting it down in half, you see what the numbers do, and you know, there's been many years with other chairmen where the request is zero.
Of course.
And I'm not necessarily in that camp. But we need to know what that bottom line number is for you guys as far as contractual arrangements, and see where we are with that and what does that do to our chart.
I think I would be a bad Board of Ed chair if I didn't take a minute to say what Gary was sort of asking Sarah, like, why isn't this on the table? And certainly you're going to give us a number, and then we're going to have to go back and figure this out. And we'll probably come back and talk to you about impact like we've done over the last few years. And I know you all have been really open to hearing about what that impact is. And so when I tell you that 3.23% really changes the way our school looks, that's not an easy cut to make. That's all I'll say about that. But I think when you look at the larger picture of like, why not? Why aren't we sort of putting staff out there as something to be cut right away? Why didn't we come to you with that? I came to you with 6.46, and we all agree on our board that that's not an easy or a small number. But we thought it was our job to come to you with a budget that said, this funds what we do now. This means that we're not making one change to any service, to any kid, or any staffing changes. And we believe that that's in the best interest of the children of North Stonington. And so I think that that's our job to come to you and say that. And if you look, I know the presentation was long, but if you look back at the presentation that I made to you last week, I talked to you about all the reasons why those services and why those staff are important. And it's because of the result. I think that you're seeing why that's good. I mean, I think Sarah spoke about it, that it doesn't feel understaffed when you're a parent and your kid needs something. And it doesn't feel understaffed when you're walking through the building. You're not seeing, 5 teachers in one room teaching 8 students. But I can tell you that what we're doing is working. And whether or not some people might say, and I spoke about this last week, some people say, well, maybe it's too much. And there'll be people in that camp, and I maybe won't be able to change that, but I can say it's absolutely not too much. And then I also want to speak one more time to what I think a financial benefit to just doing what we're doing here has been, and that's the School of Choice program. Lou, I ran those numbers after you spoke about, you made your comment last week about like, hey, look, does that include money that you're actually asking for special ed? So that number, that projected number doesn't include that. That's just our tuition. And so I would say we're providing those services to our kids. We're not adding any cost in to educate these kids from Voluntown and Preston, but they're paying to come here and take advantage of what it is that we're already delivering to kids of North Stonington. And that has developed into, I think I would like to say a significant program with about $500,000 in income coming into the town. Now, I realize that we're asking you for 16 million, so I'm not going to tell you it's a bargain, but I think I'd be asking you for that 16 million no matter what today. And instead I'm saying I'm asking you for this, but I also want to tell you how great we are, and that $500,000 is coming in because of what we do. And I think that there'd be a big change to that if we cut this budget significantly.
So I hear you, and I recognize how important the school and the quality of school is for all of our property values. However, a 6.4% increase in the school budget will change the look of the town.
I get it.
You will see people leave because they can't afford to be here much longer. And that concerns me. I mean, I get the reason for the ask is to maintain the look of the school system. But we're here to educate our kids, not necessarily attract people in from out of town to be educated in our school.
Sure.
We have a responsibility to educate the kids that live here. And I've said it before in other meetings, tuition is really decisionable by the taxpayer, whether we want to bring in kids from the outside or not. And I know Lou's ready to jump on me after this, but it's and we can take it offline. We'll go in the hallway and wrestle.
Yeah, I gotta be careful about that. Did you hear what I said before? No. Well, I just look at that as supplemental income to the town because it's almost found money because our fixed costs are just so high that the dollars that come in from those other communities, they're actually supplementing our costs substantially. And if I had the decision to make, I would expand that as much as we could and still maintain a solid delivery for our students. It's just a question if we have the capacity, if there's room in the buildings, we've got the
I was
people.
gonna say we're out of schools to move back into.
I'm sorry?
We're out of schools to move back into.
Well, I don't know. This looks pretty good. No, but I do think though that any direct costs that are associated with the students coming here, we should be reimbursed for that. So we shouldn't absorb any cost for any of those students by way of whatever variable costs that go into providing the services to those students. We should be completely reimbursed for that.
And those, I believe,
We do.
are those special ed costs that we talked about.
Right.
So those
That goes to the town.
those are being invoiced to the sending towns. And Lou, thank you for saying what I said so much better than I said it to
No,
Gary.
no.
I think you made the point, and I thought succinctly. The amount of students that are coming here aren't necessarily changing the cost one way or the other that we're
Right.
we're already incurring for our own students. And to Lou's point, that means it's a lot of found money. We are attracting an income source.
I also don't want to ever to believe that we created this program and then said, let's make our schools really great so they come.
Yeah.
So we keep saying, and it's yet to be proven to me, that we're not incurring any additional costs. We know the alternative education has now moved into this building. And there is staff supporting alternative education in this building. So where that lies as far as whether it's additional or not is somewhat cloudy to me.
So we
Because-
started alternative ed here, right? It never was over there. It was always here. I know you don't like it.
Oh, I'm well aware.
So what I would tell you about the alternative ed program is that we have not increased the staff since we started the program. And I can also tell you that cost. So if a tuitioning in student was taking advantage of the alternative ed program, there is a different cost associated with that. So it's not that standard 12 something. And that's, I think, in your chart.
We're not going back to cost per student right now, are we? Okay. What's that?
So I'm going to get you that number and I'm going to give you a rough number. Kathy and Troy are giving you a much better number. I'm going to sit down and do the math myself, and then they'll give you a better number, that the contractual obligation number.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So I guess for a point of order, we have 2 meetings scheduled between now and their next Board of Education meeting, which is meeting at the same time as our meeting. So we have 3 meetings where we have meeting Wednesday, meeting Monday, and the meeting Wednesday meets at the same time as the Board of Education meeting.
I thought they were meeting Monday.
I thought you said, 7 days from today. Okay. All right.
Today's Monday.
It still sounds like two superfluous meetings, but don't look at.
I guess I should say,
Can you get us that contractual number before next Monday?
I'm gonna have that number to you tonight and then a really good one tomorrow morning. I'm expecting on Wednesday, you're gonna tell me what I need to do.
Just give
And
us the
we'll,
really
we'll
good
talk
one.
about that.
Let's skip the one tonight.
No need to interrupt.
I think so. We should meet Wednesday. We have a contractual number. That way we can talk more. We're not going to meet on Monday. They're going to meet on Monday and discuss what we've discussed. Sound like a plan? Wednesday, we're giving guidance. Sure.
Hi. When's the auditor coming?
We don't have a set date yet, but they finalized the town side and they're doing their report now. So we should have something in the next week or two.
That puts us, usually we get a week to review it. So a week or two, we're not reviewing that until at best, first or second week of April,
Right.
when we get good numbers. That's not ideal.
No.
At all.
And just for the audience and for anyone online, the audit occurs looking at the numbers from last year at the end of year. So if there are, if the Board of Selectmen, the government side has a give back, and the Board of Education has a give back, if anything, all those numbers are just draft numbers until we get the audit that says these are the actual numbers. And why is that important? Because all those numbers, if there are givebacks, go back into the general fund. And we are basically close to our 17% ceiling as it is. And any of those givebacks are going to push us above that 17%. So whether or not, that's why I think it's got to be part of the discussion eventually in one shape or another as what are we going to do with that excess, if anything, to maintain a stable mill rate.
So on April 9th, we're acceptable to go to public hearing. That's the second week. That means the week prior, we should be getting it no later than. If we were gonna review it, do everything and send it to public hearing on the 9th.
So can you just, you tell them, please, in no uncertain terms, that the people paying the bills will need this report ASAP. And we are doing an RFP next year for putting that thing out to bid again. Hint, hint. Shh.
What's the call? He announced it. Watch the video.
All right, so it's 8:38 and I want to have everyone have a chance to talk. I'm going to pause for 5 minutes. Taking a break. I'll be right back. We're back. We're on agenda item number 6, review of minutes. We don't have any minutes at this time, so we already did that. We're not gonna, undesignated fund, that's just on there because it's gonna be part of our discussions with all, in the budget, because it just is. It's gonna be the same, this is gonna be the same, I've already done the agenda for Wednesday, and it's this. I did. I sent it out tonight because I forgot to do it today. Bob, it's in your box. Okay. So let's move on to agenda item number 7, public comments. Welcome, anyone who wants to come up and. This is for it's public comment, and you can comment on any part of what you want to discuss tonight. This is it. Yeah.
We want to hear what you have to say.
Just ask you what's your name and where do you live?
Hi, everyone. My name is Brant Emmert. I live on Wyasip Road, 641. Well, thanks for letting me speak. There's a small budget item that I saw on the list, and I don't think it's on there yet. I think it's proposed. And I think it's important. It's B26.15.
Is this on
Proposed.
the general government or school budget?
I think it's under like public safety.
The cameras?
Block cameras. My question would be to anyone on the board, does anyone know what we're buying? And then if you know that, where was it solicited from? And then I have a follow-up comment.
So to answer your question, because I talked to the Board of Finance about this, I went to we had a meeting of all the state troopers for the state of Connecticut, and they invited any CEOs that wanted to go to it. So I went. And Flock is actually a private company that handles cameras all throughout the country, and they're mostly for crime, solving crime. They're not for seeing if you went through a traffic light or not, or if you're speeding. They're to if a serious crime had taken place, and let's say there was a forced entry in North Stonington and somebody got hurt, they can track that vehicle leaving town. So their hope is to, a lot of towns have these, but not all towns. So the hope is to have towns, they could all be together with the cameras. So if they went down Route 2, Route 164, 165, and so on, they could trace these cars no matter where they went. And if the police think that the car may still be in North Stonington, rather than visit and search North Stonington for this individual they're looking for, they might, with the cameras, see that this car left North Stonington. So why are we spending money searching for here? The price of the camera is this. The idea for the camera is 2 cameras in the town of North Stonington, both on Route 2. And they're $3,000 per year for the camera. That they own the camera, they monitor the camera, they work with the state police, giving them information. I might ask Steph to mention this because she works for the court system. She uses these cameras all the time as reference points. So for the amount of money of $3,000 for a camera that they own and they maintain, there's a one-time setup fee. I think it's $1,300 or whatever it is in the budget. And then that's it. That's a one-time fee. At the end of a year, 2 years, 3 years, if we feel like we don't want to pay for these cameras, they just take them out. They're done. But again, I would not have, I don't like the idea of Big Brother. So I would not have brought cameras in to say, are you going through a red light? Are you speeding? That's not what I want these for. But if they can solve a crime, if we have a hit and run that still hasn't been solved yet, that happened on Route 2 about a year ago. If we can solve a crime by doing this, and it may be somebody coming from another town that committed a crime there, and they're harboring themselves in North Stonington. If we can find out, we can rid the town of that person, because now we know that that person's in North Stonington. It would be a way to better protect the citizens of North Stonington. So that's why it came about. It was all from a seminar. While I was in the seminar, we're actually watching live footage from San Diego because it's a national camera situation. Again, I'm not one for Big Brother, but if I can solve crimes, The state police are behind it. The state's behind it, but it's they're hoping that, I know Lisbon just put in 5. Not every town has them, but they're hoping that most towns do put them in because they're only as good as going from town to town to town. So if there's a gap between, let's say we had them and Preston doesn't have them, Griswold does, then we don't know what happened in Preston. Did they go towards Rhode Island on 164 and 165 rather, or are they heading towards Norwich on 2? That kind of thing. But that's what I know. So, and again, if Steph, if you want to mention, you said you use these a lot. You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to.
So I don't use them myself. I'm not currently looking for anyone. I work at the courthouse. I work in victim services at the courthouse, but spend a lot of time reading warrants. And these are being used by towns all around us just to figure out who's coming, who's going. Instead of just a black sedan, now they're able to talk about black sedan on this street, this license plate, and this is where this plate showed up in all these other places. Most recently, there was a governor's warrant for someone that Arizona was looking for. And instead of going in manpower, like door to door, they were able to say, like, this car comes in here at this address every day at 12:15, it leaves at this time. It just makes things more efficient, maybe a little more safe.
So thank you. So I just wanted to bring light to it, really, and I don't really want to get too opinionated on what my own opinions are, but I just think for the finance board, it's important that I think we just throw it out there because I do know quite a bit about the cameras, and it's important, I think, for us to understand what it is we're bringing into the town. And a little bit more detailed is that it is an AI platform that, I'm very much for cameras for the state police to have access, but it is important for us to understand, I think, to maybe do some more reading. There's a lot of litigation going on with this with the other towns. They are all over Connecticut. They're all over the Eastern Seaboard. One of the biggest issues, I think, is that it is not a public safety system. It's a tracking system. We don't really have any control that who gets to determine where the cameras go? And then after that, my question would be, will they be moving them around? Whose road will they be on? It's kind of basically, no detective now needs to sort through paperwork to go review something. It's a first person user system. So what that means is, like Lowe's and Lisbon has them. So they have like 3 at every entry point. So if they're a first person user, they get to pull up that aggregated data in the click of a button. I could buy one and I could put one on my road if I wanted to pay the money, and I would be a first person user, and I would be in that system. It's basically us paying for the FBI and other organizations to have instant access. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily bad technology, but what I am saying is I think it's important for us to understand exactly what it is, and do we want to be tracked individually on our roads, and especially since every other town around us has one. So if we're circumferenced by this, why are we paying for it? If the state police want to do it, and they were the only ones, if we could contractually say with Flock, only the state police in our town will have access to that data, and we're not going to allow first person user access to the rest of the system. But I don't think Flock's going to go for that. So I think, I guess I did give you a little bit of my opinion, but I think just knowing what we're signing up for is important to throw out there. Thank you.
Well, that's what these things are for. This is, people have specialized knowledge in different areas, and we value your comments. Thank you.
So I just want to come back to you on that. So I think that's good information that I didn't have. I will say that we can say where the cameras are going to go on what road. We have 4 traffic lights on Route 2. They would go on 2 of the 4 lights on Route 2. We haven't been determined which lights those were, but that's the only place they'd be was on Route 2. But I will take the information that you just had. I will speak to my state trooper about it and get more information from him. But I think that's great information. Thank you.
Yeah, I think Bob said it right. I mean, and I think everyone would agree that we do not want Big Brother, in monitoring our town saying, you ran a stoplight or you did, you swerved. It's to coordinate public safety with, the state police that are in pursuit of somebody. Public comments can be on any subject that we're talking about, budgetary wise. It doesn't have to be about limited to Board of Education or Board of Selectmen. Could be capital, could be debt. So go ahead, Brian.
Okay, Brian Rathbun, 263 Grindstone Hill Road. I trust everybody got my analysis, I guess you might say.
Yes, we did. And
I'm
I
glad
wanted-
I,
I
I'm
was gonna
glad I
comment
did it
about-
because it would take me more than 2 minutes to say that. So I hope you look at them. Like I say, it's my opinion of the different things, my suggestions on the different things. I've been to a lot of meetings. I've heard from the Board of Selectmen and what I've heard from the Board of Education. I think there's room for improvement. And I think I've said it before at your meetings, where the different room of improvements could be. So I won't go through them all. A couple of things I am confused on is, one of them is the cost per student, which is, I guess, from what I understand, it's kind of controversial figure. But to me, if we had outside students coming in, that cost should be what we pay for our students, not any less, it should be the same. There should be, I think, a reducing the transportation, even though now I know it's a contractual thing. And the contractual with teachers or unions can be opened, but the party that wants to open it has to go to the union and ask them, then they got to go, and then they can vote whether they want to open it or not. I doubt if that'll happen very much at all. The other thing was, where did the old computers go? If we bought new computers, where would the old ones go? We're going to buy new computers every 5 years. Gosh, I think mine's 10 years old and it still works. Not that great, but it works. Of course, I won't tell you about my truck. I hear there's 20 minutes to log on. That's 20 minutes of education going out the window, as far as I'm concerned. I don't know what the teacher to student ratio is. I don't know how many students are in each class. I see we went down to 726 students, and I believe it's projected in up to 2040. It's supposed to be even lower than that. So I don't see a lot of super improvement. And it isn't going to be a baby boom like they had back in the 60s or even after the Vietnam War. So anyways, and I also understand the only thing I can do is vote for the bottom line, basically, on the Board of Education. So I think that's a figure we all got to watch, because the Board of Education has the ability to change things around if they want to. And that's why I say with this, when there's a cost up front, and if it's in that budget and that cost isn't there next year, that's extra money they already made for next year. And where's that go? In that, I call it the undesignated fund that they have, whatever they call that thing now. It doesn't go back to the general fund. So anyways, as you know, I'm a senior citizen on a fixed income. We got quite a few of them. We ended up with, I think it was a 2.5%. So in my simple thinking, The budget goes over 2.5%, and you're reaching into my pocket unless you can prove different. And I hope there isn't a bunch of jibber jabber just to make me convinced. All right, thank you. And I think you done, it was a healthy conversation tonight. I appreciate the two boards we got here, and I appreciate the board we got there. And that's coming from this old senior citizen. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. We appreciate you being at every meeting and being as informed as you are. Anyone else? Yeah, come on up. Okay. Pat, you're next.
Hi, my name is Jackie Barry. I actually don't live in town, but I am a teacher for the district. I did prepare a statement because I'm not a natural public speaker, so I get very nervous. But I am going to add a couple of things just based on what I heard tonight. So thank you for your time. I'm a reading specialist at the elementary school, and this is also my first year as president of the Teachers Union. I was here at the last meeting in its entirety till 10:15, like many of us were. So I heard a lot of different perspectives, townspeople, a student, different people speaking. So I'm here to give a teacher's perspective on things. I don't know how many of you know this or how many people in the audience know this, but North Stonington is actually one of the lowest paying districts in our county. So when people are talking about going back into our contract and looking at that, it's just like almost laughable, and makes me want to cry at the same time. So just to give you a couple of specific numbers, I'm not going to get too deep into this, but someone coming into our district as a new teacher with just a bachelor's degree is making $2,500 less than the average New London County salary for a teacher. And then on the opposite end, someone at the maximum step with a master's degree is making $4,000 below the average in New London County as well. And on top of that, we are one of the few districts in the entire state that are still below $90,000 for that maximum step of a teacher with their master's degree. So I just thought it was important to share those facts. Many teachers have second jobs. We don't just get our salary from the town just to pay our bills or to be able to go on vacations with families. Teachers are doing jobs like tutoring, waitressing. I myself do DoorDash a few nights a week. I know other teachers that do DoorDash as well. And we're exhausted. We also have teachers who depend on homework club and summer school income, which I know summer school has been talked about possibly being taken away for regular ed students. But again, that's something we depend on. Also, sometimes people say, oh, well, teachers have summers off, so they really make good money because they have the summers off. Well, many of us, so again, we have these types of jobs in the summer. Having said all of that, though, even though our district may be one of the lowest paying, teachers have longevity here. We love this town. We love the small feel. We love the students. We love the family atmosphere. I know people like to highlight our test scores, but without our teachers, our paras, our programs, our test scores most likely wouldn't be as high as they are, and our students may not be as successful. Our teachers in North Stonington do not think of teaching as just a job. It's a lifelong commitment to our students. We are here dedicating our lives to our students and to our district. I do understand that the increase request is high. I understand that. Considering though that we've had an average increase of 2.58% in the past 10 years, over the past 10 years, as well as budget increases in surrounding towns, I feel like this increase is necessary and it should have been expected. It would definitely be impossible to keep everything the same. But as people were talking about, like possibly cutting it in half to the 3-point-something%, my UNISERV rep is here, Greg, and he said that would be cutting 6 teachers' positions to cut that in half. This isn't in my statement, but just knowing like what we were told before this was all presented, the budget increase was presented, we could have possibly lost the half-time reading specialist. And I will let you know right now that she works with grades 5 and 6, and she is utilized every single minute, every single second of the day that she is here, those 2.5 days a week. So she is much needed. But there's also another teacher that was told that she could be losing her full-time position and be brought down to a 0.4 position. And that teacher is the main breadwinner in her household. She would lose her insurance as well. So I'm also advocating for her. Let's see. We also have to consider, which everyone's talked about, but the rising cost of utilities and transportation. I mean, these are things that we can't help, we can't change. And I just want you to know that your decision impacts all of our students, all of our teachers, families of teachers, families of people in town, taxpayers. I understand that too. But only you can decide if the impact will have a positive or a negative effect on everyone. And I really hope that you take everyone's comments and everyone's lives and opinions and just the facts into consideration. And thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. We appreciate your perspective, and I'm glad to hear from all sides of these issues. It's very important for everyone here to hear from the community and take those comments to heart. I think we have Pat Lewis wanted to speak. Pat, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, I've got a hoarse voice, so I'm not going to say everything I want to talk about. But I had a couple questions on the education one. On number 8, you're going to eliminate the IT director. But on technology, number 91, there's a tech consortium tech support. Is that taking the position of or doing the same thing as an IT director would do, or some of those responsibilities, or replacing him with software, or what is that $80,000 for?
Yes, please.
Oh, there we go. Hey, Pat, it's Stephanie. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. So our IT director retired this year, and we did an analysis of whether or not it was the right decision to replace him at his salary or to look and see if we could outsource that. So we are using Learn, which is that consortium that can provide that help. And that $80,000 represents a 2-day a week, if you were to take an average, IT director. And it's not just one person. So we can access whatever sort of skill set that we need for that time. So if we need someone to work on our network, we can do that. And if we have a hardware issue, that person, or they'll send us someone that can do that. Additionally, that sends also a part-time tech here, so that that's obviously paid at a lower rate, and that person can come in and handle our day-to-day stuff. We also have retained our on-site technician that we've always had. So we always have someone here, but now Learn can support us for $80,000 in a way that I think we were in the 160s without looking at the presentation for the IT director.
It was 116.
116?
Yeah.
Thanks, Mike. So Pat, we're not replacing
117.
the director with software or anything like that. Oh, Mike, there was a benefit cost associated with that as well.
Yeah, that was my next question. Is this just outsourcing as a consultant, or is it a benefit status position?
No, it's outsourcing as a consultant.
Okay. I did have some concerns, but I probably can't voice them all in 2 minutes. And again, it has to do with the screens, screen versus books. And I have a question as if these kids, many of them are sitting in classes, I assume, that are 90 minutes long. how long can these kids sit in a classroom without having to get up and walk around or go to the bathroom or, in the middle of a software presentation, are they able to ask questions? But I guess my thought on that is 90 minutes is a long time for a kid to sit still in a class in front of a screen. And are some of them so frustrated that they become considered to be disruptive or special needs? And that's why we need paras, and that's why we need social workers and psychologists. And I hate to get off on a tangent, but those are concerns to me. Also, like Sarah said, in the early years, like in second, third, and fourth grade, the kids were behind in reading and probably in spelling words and math. And then now these kids are like sixth, seventh, and eighth graders, and are we shoving them in front of a computer without giving them those basic skills that they got behind in? Is there an option in there that they can have a class with kids that are advanced and can use computers, and kids that really need books to sit down and look at and review and go back and write things out rather than getting shoved in front of a computer? You're all for this sustainability software, but is this the right thing for every kid in there? And yet you're making them, we're going through this big expense of buying computers and buying the software and having to renew these licenses. I think this whole thing needs to be reviewed. And again, one more thing is, we are requiring all these the social worker and the psychologist, and every time we lose one position, it seems we have to hire two. We hired 2 psychologists for one. We hired 2 social workers. We got rid of, we hired a athletic director along with a physical ed teacher. Anyway, that's it. I've got more to say, but it won't fit in 2 minutes. Thank you.
They would not be in favor of them. I think if you're not educated on exactly what they are, you should take a look at it, look it up, find out what they are. Colchester's in litigation with a number of other towns. So it's worth looking at. I'm personally not in favor of it. Owning a home in North Stonington is beginning to feel like not a fee for services. It's beginning to feel like rent from the town, or we are leasing our property from the town. I find it hard to believe it's going to be a $300 or $400 increase by the time the mill rate is set. I find that number hard to believe. Okay. Last time I spoke about a growing demographic of homeschoolers. All right. There's also a growing number of private school. There's a tiny little private school in the center of town that educates kids K through 12 for less than $4,000 a year. They don't have all the services. They're not as grand, but they're doing it. Okay. It's difficult as a homeschooler and a taxpayer to listen to proposals for 7% increase. We don't have special ed teachers. We don't have social workers, school psychologists, paraprofessionals, athletic directors. We do have some behavioral technicians. Not as many, but we do have 2 of them in my home. I just want to speak on behalf of people who are average like myself. 1 income, 2 when I work a second job. A mother who stays home and makes tremendous sacrifices for her children to homeschool them. And like I said, this is a growing demographic. So the government school system is up against this growing demographic. They're also up against another sector of homeschoolers who are part of a growing and robust homeschool co-op, which I won't mention the name of it. But you're in competition with it, whether you realize it or not. You have a declining enrollment. I know you want to say that it's stable, but it is declining. 7% is a big number. And I also want some clarification on something that hasn't been discussed. I don't think it was discussed in the last meeting. It wasn't discussed in this meeting. And I don't know who even asked this question to, but it seems like it's actually more than 6.4% because some of the cost, if I understand it correctly, some of the maintenance costs for the school is being shifted to the town budget. Do I understand that correctly or no? So what would be the school's increased proposed budget if those numbers were added together? Percentage. So 6.4 now, what would be the ask? Is there a reason why the school isn't covering these costs, and were they traditionally covering these costs that are being shifted?
Well, part of it is we own the town owns the buildings over there. And with the new building and then the maintenance that is starting to come to need, there's been a discussion amongst the Board of Education and the Board of Selectmen, and we have a capital committee that we created to try to figure out whose responsibility should they be given, who owns the buildings and who's using it. And so there's a we're trying to figure out is things that they're using every day to educate the kids. They're usually on the hook for that stuff. The stuff that are infrastructure things. And Gary, you can probably explain it a little bit better than me.
So when we looked at it as the capital committee, Sarah's part, Lou's part, Lisa Mazzella's part, Bob was there. The buildings are town assets. And the thinking behind putting the maintenance with the town is because ultimately, if the school were to cease to exist, the town would retain ownership of those assets. So they have to be maintained effectively and properly. And they just felt that putting the maintenance with the entity that owns the assets is the right place for the budget to be. It was a clean shift of maintenance out, maintenance in.
I guess my question in response to that would be, is this all the maintenance? Is this all of the maintenance, or is it part of the maintenance, or is it the fields? is the vehicles that the school has? What is the scope of it?
It's the bricks and mortar. So if it's attached to the building and needs to be there, if the school wasn't there, it's the town's. If it has to do with the programs that are being provided by the school or attributes that the school requires, it's the schools. But this is something that the school and the Board of Selectmen are going to work through as they go down the road.
Okay. It does seem like we're splitting hairs a little bit because we're looking at 6.4 for the school and 2.4% added to the town's budget. Correct me if I'm wrong. If these maintenance items are added to the town, so that would be almost a 9% altogether.
No, you can't add them. That
Okay.
doesn't work.
Okay.
I think Bob presented his budget both ways, with or
Okay.
without that extra
Okay.
100,000.
So you're saying the town budget's going up by 2%?
Correct.
2.4%?
Right.
Okay. So you're saying it's 0.75%?
Sorry.
Okay, I appreciate you clarifying that.
In
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah. Yep, I get it now. Yeah. Thank you.
Sure.
I just wanted to take a minute to talk a little bit about declining enrollment and the sort of the phrase in competition with. So again, I know that we're seeing 8 less kids in our school predicted for next year. Again, I'm going to object to using the phrase declining enrollment because our enrollment has always gone up and down by a few kids. And our long-term projections don't show that we're declining. Additionally, this is something that's just really normal. So if you look 3 years back, we had a bit of a bump. We don't say we're increasing in our enrollment. We're just flat. And that's, I think, a safe place for us to be as well. In terms of the growing demographic of homeschoolers or private school, I don't really know. I know that you made an estimate last week. I know that estimate feels high because we didn't build a school including that many kids. And I think we had to do some studies on that. In terms of being, and I didn't love the term in competition, but I'm going to use it just because you used it. So for comparison purposes. So we always have other options for the kids that attend. Really, the ones I'm talking about are for our high school kids. They're not options for younger kids, but we've always had options for magnet schools for our kids to go to tech schools or to VOAG schools. Now, those schools, if a child applies and they're accepted, the town, right? So our school, our taxpayers have to pay some portion of those educational costs. So for the VOAG schools, the school pays a portion and then the state subsidizes a portion of that. For the magnet schools, the school pays full tuition to send a kid to a magnet school. We don't have an option. And we don't have to pay transportation. For the tech schools, we don't have to pay their tuition, but we have to pay transportation. And the reason why I just say I don't love in competition with, because we see these as educational opportunities for kids. And if that's where their best opportunity is, we want them to take full advantage of that. But I want you to know that those have always been in play. Sure. So those have always been in play. We always have kids that come and go in that program, in all of those programs. But those are always opportunities for our kids, in addition to the fact that we've always had private schools that a parent can opt to fund to send a kid to. And obviously if a family wanted to homeschool, they always have that opportunity. But I think that what we do have to note is that the education that we're providing here at our public school is attractive to other towns. And so while there certainly are lots of options for our kids to leave and go to, we're not seeing a large number of kids go, and that saves the town money because we're not paying to outplace them somewhere. Additionally, we're realizing, I think this year we'll be at 37 projected students from Preston and Voluntown. So they're opting in. Those towns are paying to send their kids here to be a part of what we are giving. So I know that there are options. It's probably great that there are options, and every family should make the choice that's right for their kids. But I don't want anyone in the public to hear that term declining enrollment and think that that's really what our numbers are showing. And I never want anyone to think that there aren't other options for kids right here in our town. Thanks.
Thank you, Stephanie. That's all good points as well. Oh yeah, please go ahead.
Do I need to introduce myself again? Okay. Thank you. And your point is well taken. But I want to point out that look, given the real estate market in North Stonington and the taxes and what they're going to be in North Stonington, it's unlikely that the school numbers will go up. There's not a lot of families with children buying homes in North Stonington. For one, there's not much availability, and the cost to buy here and the taxes are becoming prohibitive. And I want to reinforce the point I made before that it's beginning to feel like we are leasing our properties from the town. Thank you.
Did Pat want to? She's gone. Okay. Anyone else that's in the public? I mean, I'm not gonna, wax philosophic, but I mean, we're statutorily obligated to educate our children in the state. And, the teacher's point, I'm sorry, was it Jackie? To Jackie's point, we have, our teachers are not underpaid, but the salaries are certainly competitive. I think this town has done a fantastic job in maintaining its fiscal profile while providing an unbelievable education for our kids. Having one child that's a sophomore and one child that's gone through the whole system. I'm extremely proud of this town school system. And we are schools of distinction. And given our statutory obligation, I think we do a hell of a job. And that's not to take away from families who want to do something else. I just think we have a private school education at a public school price here in North Stonington. And, we will, if there are questions about programs and what have you, I encourage people to go to the Board of Education meetings and make those suggestions known. Public is always welcome at those meetings, and that's those questions about programs themselves are certainly more appropriate for that venue than this one. Although we do want to hear from what you have to say with regard to how it affects your pocketbooks. We are going to meet again on Wednesday. We're going to have some solid numbers in what is the contractual obligation increases only before that meeting. And then I imagine after your Monday meeting next Wednesday, we're going to hear from you as to, what would these budgets, if we are talking those numbers, what do they look like? So this board can say, we're willing to accept any kind of cuts or put it to the town to decide if they want further cuts. But we've had some productive meetings, and hopefully we're moving towards a consensus on where we need to be. And motion to adjourn.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.